Welcome to K-State Now with Kansas State University President Dr. Kirk Schultz. I'm Richard Baker. There have been some problems on campuses around the United States here lately. Missouri, Yale, a few at the University of Kansas. Kansas State doesn't seem to have a problem of the same sort with its minority students. What is the difference?
You know, I think we have to separate, in my mind, some of the issues on campus with inclusivity and racism from some of the demonstrations. And so I think at K-State we have some similar challenges with building an inclusive community. And Richard, by inclusive, I mean for our underrepresented minority students, for students from outside the United States, for our GLBT community. It's not just a particular group or a particular set of things. And we've got work to do here at Kansas State, just like Missouri and everywhere else does, to continue to build that inclusive campus. I think the difference has been, and historically at K-State, the students and administration have worked closely together to solve problems mutually, not through demands, but sitting down, understanding each other's perspectives and moving forward. And I think that's what's happening here, and some of the reasons you haven't seen some of the same types of demonstrations is not that those problems aren't there, but we have good working relationships with our student leadership. We have excellent folks at the VP level or Chief Diversity Officer and others work closely with our students. And I think there's a sense of let's work together to build a more inclusive campus, and making overt demands or getting to the point where you say this person needs to be terminated, I don't think that's part of the K-State culture and the way we do things.
Is there a difference in our students from students that you maybe see on other campuses? And I guess where I'm coming from is we have a lot of kids with agricultural backgrounds. Does that make some kind of a difference?
I think we have a respectful student body, and that regardless of whether they come from an ag background, a rural background, or an urban background, I think they come onto campus with a sense of wanting to be part of something greater. And it doesn't mean we don't have activist students. I think there's a big difference between the two. But at the same time, I think those backgrounds do make a difference. But as we were talking beforehand, this morning, I had breakfast with the student government leadership to talk about things like guns, inclusivity, a tobacco-free work environment, these kind of things. Guess what? We meet every single month of the year and have for the last 7 years to talk about different kinds of things. So it doesn't happen that there's something that comes up and all of a sudden we frantically got to get together and meet. We have this history of working on these things and putting them out in front and debating and arguing and then coming to some sort of consensus. And that's the way K-State has worked for a long, long time. And I was fortunate to be part of that kind of a culture, and we've been able to maintain it.
One of the things I've noticed over the years that our hiring committees many times have a student or a couple of students on that committee. Mm-hmm. Is that normal for a university to do?
Well, no. Not to the extent that K-State does. So on my presidential search committee, there was 3 students. We had a student body president from here, somebody from Salina, and there was another student that was also part of that search committee. Generally speaking, when you hire a president of a university or a chancellor, there might be a single student involved. I use that as an example, and we have continued that tradition. Actually, what we've done is we've added to it. Most of our committees now also have a graduate student because undergraduate and graduate students have different perspectives on things. They're looking for different types of things in leaders, whether it's a dean, department head, chief diversity officer, whatever. And I think that's an important part of what we've always done, and we need to continue to do that because there's always some pressure thinking, well, do we really need a student on there? What does a 19-year-old know about, fill in the blank? My experience on those committees, Richard, is sometimes the student will be the person that says, the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. And everybody goes, yep, you're right. And they were just willing to say that. And the students that I've been involved with on search committees will work just as hard, if not harder, because they want to make sure that the faculty and other people around the table think they're a valuable member of those committees. But I do think that goes back to that sense of working together and trying to come up with mutual ways to get where we need to go, as opposed to any particular group just simply making demands and hoping that that's going to somehow solve your problems in the long run. The bigger issue I see at some of the places, and let's use Missouri as an example, so you've had a turnover at the top and some things like that. In the long run, if you even do some of the things some of the groups have said and you check the boxes off, have you really changed the campus culture? And I worry that sometimes if somebody gives me a list and says, Kirk, here's the 3 things that you need to do, and I go 1, 2, 3, you can say, well, Kirk, yeah, you did them, but you didn't really change the way you did anything. It was just you checked the boxes. And that's what I worry about on some of these demand type agendas, is that you can throw money at it, but you're not really making the institutional change that is behind a lot of it. And I think that's really where the hard part is, and that's long term. That can't be done in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months.
I'm in the College of Agriculture, and we have an official who handles diversity in our college. Is that normal university-wide?
Most of the institutions where I've worked have had a person that sort of was a chief diversity officer. K-State was the first place that I had come to that each college tended to have a faculty member, largely, that also served in that particular role. Some in the College of Ag, it's full-time. Some of the other colleges, it's a person that's doing some teaching and research and doing that as a part-time appointment. I think that's helped. Because you've got somebody to go to ask questions and can help search committees and help faculty, staff, and students. But at the same time, it's an institutional culture, and so we can't just look to the chief diversity officer of the university and say, you've got to make us more diverse. What we need that person to come and do is help us build a more inclusive community that can answer tough questions, that can help us get there, but provide some roadmaps and help us understand why should we work for an inclusive community. That's the part that's sometimes missing. It's not just because some group over here says you need to have it. We had a situation in our cabinet where something came up with a underrepresented minority student, and a very awkward kind of conversation was going to have to occur. Well, I have a much more diverse cabinet than we did 7 years ago, with men, women, people of color. We had one of our vice presidents said, I think I can handle that, went and took care of it, and took something that could have been very volatile and really took care of it. And the person came back, and I said, man, that was great. And they said, this is why you need a diverse cabinet. And it's a reminder that inclusivity needs to be something that we really want to have as a campus community. We need some leaders behind it, but ultimately when you're on a search committee or you're looking for something, are you thinking, I need to make sure that we're as inclusive as possible? And that's where we've got to get to as a campus.
It seems to me at times, the way things go, and not particularly on this campus, but a little bit, is it's more incumbent upon the minority students, the minority faculty members, to do more of the work than you and I as white faculty members, as the white leader of the university.
Absolutely, and it's a problem from the perspective of it's unfair to our underrepresented minority faculty. So I've come out of the College of Engineering, and historically engineering has been Caucasian and male. And you go back 30 years and it was hard to find women faculty members of any type, even in many colleges of engineering. So what happens, that first generation women faculty got to serve on every diversity committee, every women's initiative. They're still trying to build their research, build their research program, teach their students, do all those sort of things, and would get burdened with every time you needed a representative on a committee, well, we need a female. Well, let's take one of our 3 faculty and put them on there. So universities and campuses have got to do a better job of not always leaning on the same exact people to help out with diversity and inclusion efforts, which means that you and I have to be informed and educated and advocates for diversity and inclusion, not just people whose skin color is different or whose racial background is different.
I attended the retirement ceremony last night for Dr. Myra Gordon, the Associate Provost for Diversity here at Kansas State. And I don't want her to hear me say this, but some big shoes to fill there when she's gone. Is that something that kind of worries you?
Absolutely. Myra's, anybody who's met Myra, she's got a magnetic personality. She's one of the people who kind of walks in the room. Everybody knows that she's there. She's been a tireless advocate for diversity at the K-State campus. And anytime you have a great leader, somebody who's been impactful to our students, faculty, and staff leave, it's a hole to fill. But Richard, as I tell the cabinet, and every time we have a leader or anybody, a faculty member, move on to a leadership position at a different institution, it's an opportunity for us to go out and find another person that hopefully does that better. I'm not going to be K-State president forever. When I'm no longer president, I hope the university goes out and gets somebody with a bigger skill set that can do a better job than I can. I think that's what we need for every single one of those roles. And I think if we look at the environment here now, this is a great opportunity for somebody to come in and be our Chief Diversity Officer. Myra's teed a lot of stuff up. We've got the Chief Diversity Officers in every college. We're talking about inclusion as a campus. A lot of those things have changed for the better over the last decade. So I think it's a nice opportunity for somebody to come in, and I'm excited about us going out and attracting a great candidate.
A little earlier, you mentioned another problem, guns on campus. Where does that stand right now?
Well, Kansas legislature passed a law that as of July 1 of 2017, so basically 18 months from now, concealed carry will be just simply allowed all over campus unless we put up some sort of security measures in each building to basically search people, if you will, like going to the airport through a TSA screening into each of our buildings. That's what the law in Kansas says, and until that's changed, as a university, we must prepare for that. We've had several of our faculty, student, and staff groups who feel pretty strongly that guns should not be allowed on campus, and they're making their voices heard to the Kansas legislature and to the Kansas Board of Regents. I put out a letter to campus. I do not believe guns have a place on our campus. The only guns I want on our campus are the ones that the university police have. But everybody doesn't agree with that. So what we're going to do is there'll be some groups that will work with the legislature to see if that can be changed. I'm skeptical that can happen, but I think people have their right. They need to make their opinions known. And then we've got another group that says, okay, we're not going to argue whether it's good or not. We're going to say, what do we have to do to comply with the Kansas law by the time it takes place next summer? And Richard, as we were talking about, people they've worried about safety, which is the paramount thing. There's a lot of expenses associated with doing some of the necessary measures for buildings on our campuses. And we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars, we're talking millions of dollars that we're going to have to find somewhere. And so it's not just the safety issues on campus. The secondary issues is also, dollars that we're going to be spending on things that our campus community largely is going to say we don't want to have in the first place. And guess what? Those dollars could be used for salaries and other types of things that we need to be doing on our campus. So it's a volatile issue. There's going to be lots of different viewpoints on it. I'm encouraging our faculty, staff, and students to make their opinions known to the elected officials. But the law is, if it stands the way it is, we're going to be prepared to comply with Kansas law next summer, July of 17.
I don't want to get you in trouble here, but what happens if you put in your next budget request the money to safeguard all of these buildings?
It's going to be in there simply because we're going to have to put it in there. I mean, we've got to acknowledge, and when I stand up to the legislature this year and talk about things that we need to do, I'm certainly going to say, hey, if this stands, here's the type of dollars that it's going to take us to make sure our campus is safe for our faculty, staff, and students. And I think it's incumbent on me as president, representing the university, to make sure that we're putting those kind of facts out there so our legislators, our parents, and people know that this does have an impact financially on our campus as well.
Where do the regents stand on this?
They have taken so far a pretty neutral stance, and the presidents met with the regents last month, and we laid out a lot of what we feel is coming from our faculty, staff, and students, and we let the regents know that at some particular point they're going to be presented with some data and information about guns on campus from our campuses, and they're going to need to be prepared at that time to take a stance. There's clearly a few of the regents that think There's no place for guns on campus. We have a few of the regents that believe that citizens ought to be able to carry firearms wherever they would like to go, regardless of where that is. And so it's going to be some volatile and interesting discussion even amongst the 9 regents as to what types of things we need to be doing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been K-State Now with Kansas State University President Dr. Kirk Schultz. I'm Richard Baker.